The lovely Patrick Sharpe is now going to tell you how to think like a behavioural scientist in the real world.
For those that don't know me already, I'm Patrick and I am an applied behavioural scientist. I couldn't always call myself that. In fact, I was a long way from being there, certainly when I started as an intern with Hannah back in 2018. I was doing a summer internship in behavioural science, and the reason I've got a little coffee logo there is probably because I was most useful at fetching the Starbucks order. But I certainly learned a lot, and then I moved on to a behavioural economics master's in the Netherlands, and then after that I've done 4 years in insurance at a company called Swiss Re, and for about 8 months or so I've been a freelance consultant. So first of all, what's it like to think like an applied behavioural scientist? So the golden rule of applied behavioural science, whether you're an academic researcher or you work in industry, is whenever possible, test, test, test. So by this I mean A/B testing, randomized control trials, whatever you want to call it. These are the bread and butter of a behavioural scientist, and they're really valuable. But why do we need experiments in industry if all of the theories that we get given by these academics have already been tested with experiments? Well, there's a number of reasons. Firstly, experiments in business settings, they help you fuel creativity. And by this I mean, when you get the chance to run an experiment, anyone can throw an idea out. It doesn't matter if you're the loudest voice in the room or you're an intern. All of those ideas are valid if you've got a good theory, and then you can test them. And the one that wins is going to be the one that moves behavior by the most, not whoever says the idea. So it's really valuable just for being able to judge ideas by their merits, not by who says them. Also, you get to prove value. Now, the beautiful thing about experiments is you're testing changes in isolation. And so you can see how far you're moving the needle on behavior. And if you're tracking a metric like sales or customer retention, you can put a dollar value on that amount. And the amazing thing about that is, like, if you're in an end-of-year review or you're trying to prove your value in an organization, those numbers are really helpful for cementing your status as someone who creates value. And the final reason is that you avoid really costly mistakes. So many times we've run experiments or we've done a proof of concept, an idea that we thought would work really well totally flops. So recently we were running a proof of concept where we wanted to see if we called insurance customers that had recently cancelled, if we could see if we could get them to start their policies back up again. It turned out we couldn't. But fortunately, we'd only tried this with 2 members of staff, not 20. So we saved quite a lot of resources and training and time just by running a small experiment first. But as much as we love experiments, they're not always possible, especially the perfect ones that you see in academia with the rigorous methodologies. So sometimes you have to run experiments with small samples or imperfect randomization, these sorts of things. And that's all fine when you're in industry, because we're not publishing papers. Most of the time, we're just sending out around emails with results. So for example, a lot of the time in a perfect experiment, you want to get 50% randomized perfectly into each condition if there's a control and a treatment. But for example, what you could do instead is, if you can't get a system where you can do this perfect randomization, you could run one version on 1 week and one version on another and just keep alternating, and it's good enough. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. And as long as one of those weeks doesn't include like Christmas, you're probably fine. So perfect experiments aren't always possible, and actually experiments aren't always possible either. So do we just sit around waiting until we can run one? Thankfully not. We've got this wonderful thing in behavioral science called the behavioral science mindset, and whether you're running experiments or not, you can use it. So what does this mindset consist of? Well, the first thing is empathy with end users. As a behavioral scientist, you have that responsibility for bringing people into the conversation. So I've worked in insurance for years, and they work with big numbers, big spreadsheets, and they love to sort of condense everything down to lines on a spreadsheet. And it's just not how people are. So it's almost the responsibility of a behavioral scientist to bring people back into the room and back into focus, because we are best placed to understand what motivates people and what stands in the way of them doing things. We love the data. As behavioral scientists, we always make decisions based on the evidence, and it's not just any evidence. We love behavioral evidence. So that's what people do, not just what people say. And finally, we have this responsibility to think differently about problems, be creative, and be a little bit contrarian. Be people that challenge the normative ways of thinking and be skeptical. So many times people will want to build something in a business because they can do it. And it's the job of the behavioral scientist to say, hang on a second, I know you can build this, but should you build it? Will people actually use it? Will they actually buy it? It's the skeptical view of human nature that makes us really valuable. So I'll give you a few examples of how this applies to things that aren't experiment, but still makes behavioral science mindsets really useful. So I think that behavioral scientists make really good researchers. So research is adjacent to behavioral science, but it's not exactly the same. And I think the reason why behavioral scientists make great researchers is because we can ask really good questions. Questions that get to the heart of behaviors and not just attitudes. So, for example, a standard survey question might be, how much do you care about the environment? And you could use a Likert scale from not a lot to a great deal. Well, a behavioral scientist might ask this a different way. Which of the following do you do? Recycle, use eco settings on your washing machines, offset your carbon emissions, take reusable bags to the shops. These are all actual behaviors that people do. And if people tick off a lot of these, you can tell that they care about the environment, not just that they're paying lip service to it. So if you wanted to sort of count how many of these someone does, you get a really good indication of how environmentally friendly someone actually is. Another example, how interested are you in this product versus please leave your email if you'd like to be contacted when this product is available. If they won't even leave their email address, they're probably not ever going to buy your product. So this is a much better signal of intent than just asking people if they're interested. And finally, you could ask how many hours per week do you spend on social media, or you could say, please upload a screenshot of your screen time for last week. And this will give you the actual evidence and not what people would like to believe they spend on social media or Netflix or whatever. And finally, I think we make really good experience managers. So a lot of the times if you're designing like a sales process, you want to find out what people's experience of that is. And you might capture a bunch of these dimensions, like how friendly was the sales agent? How easy is it to buy? And if you just look at this list of stars, you'd probably think, well, we need to focus on making it better, less complicated to understand, and maybe improve the pricing. Because both of those score 3 stars. Well, a behavioral scientist with our hats on that behavior is more important purely than what people say, what we would do is correlate that with something like retention. So now you're seeing if maybe likelihood to stay is more influenced by how easy it is to understand. So this is where you should prioritize your attention first. So in summary, applied behavioral scientists, we love to run experiments, but they're not always going to be perfect, and they're not always possible. So that doesn't mean we just give up and wait around for experiments to happen. We can use our wonderful behavioral science mindset. So empathy with end users, bringing people into that conversation. Data points that are based on behavior with what people do, not just what people say. And finally, take the responsibility to think creatively, think differently, be skeptical about human nature, because that realistic view of human nature is what makes us so special in organizations. And this mindset's really handy for lots of things like building software people actually use and research that really understands people. So the next time that you're running a project and you need some of this mindset, look no further than a behavioral scientist. Thank you.